They cropped me out from the family portrait after the wedding. So, I handed my son an envelope. After my son's wedding before Easter, I saw the framed family portrait. My face cropped out completely. No one bothered about it. At the Easter family dinner, I handed my son an envelope and said, "Don't open it here." They did anyway. My daughter-in-law started crying. My son went pale. Have you ever been left out of something so important by the people you love most? Share some of your experience in the comments. Hello, my name is Margaret. I'm 62 years old, a retired nurse and a proud mother of 2. I've never been the type to speak publicly or share my life on platforms like this. But something happened recently that shook me so deeply, I felt I had to tell my story. It all started after my son's wedding. It was a beautiful ceremony, at least for those who attended. I was there, of course. I helped plan, paid for the catering, even hemmed the flower girl's dress myself. I've always supported my family in every way I could. I never expected what was coming. The betrayal didn't come with harsh words or screaming. It came quietly, framed and proudly displayed, with my face carefully cut out from the family portrait taken after the wedding. So I did what no one expected. I waited until Easter dinner, and I handed my son an envelope. Before we begin, I would be glad to know that my story gets to people in different parts of the world, so please let me know where you're watching from. Also, thank you so much for joining this growing community. Your support means everything. Let us begin. The wedding venue glowed under the late afternoon sun, its white marquee tent draped with soft ivy and twinkling lights. I stood at the edge of the lawn, smoothing the pale blue dress I'd spent weeks choosing, the one that felt elegant but not showy. My son Ethan was marrying Lila, a woman with a laugh that carried like wind chimes and eyes that seemed to hold a secret even when she smiled. I'd thrown myself into helping with the wedding, poring over seating charts, suggesting caterers, even hand-tying ribbons around the favors late into the night. It was my son's day, and I wanted it to be perfect. But as I watched the guests mingle, their champagne glasses catching the light, a quiet unease settled in my chest, like a stone I couldn't dislodge. I made my way toward the seating area, weaving through clusters of relatives and friends. Ethan's college buddies clapped each other's shoulders, their laughter booming. Lila's family, polished and poised, moved with an effortless grace, their voices low and melodic. I caught snippets of their conversations, talk of summer homes, European vacations, things that felt like glimpses into a world I'd never quite touched. My life had been simpler, grounded in long shifts at the hospital and raising Ethan on my own after his father left. But I'd always prided myself on giving him everything I could, on being the kind of mother who showed up no matter what. "Margaret," a voice broke through my thoughts. It was Aunt Clara, Ethan's great aunt, hobbling toward me with her cane. Her silver hair was swept into a bun, and her eyes sparkled with the kind of mischief that only comes with age. "You look like you're carrying the weight of the world, dear. Come, sit with me." I smiled, grateful for her warmth. "Just taking it all in, Clara. It's a lot." She patted my arm, her grip surprisingly firm. "Weddings are like that. All joy and chaos wrapped in one. But you've done wonders helping out. Ethan's lucky to have you." Her words should have soothed me, but they didn't. I'd spent months on the phone with florists, double-checking RSVPs, even driving an hour to pick up Lila's custom veil when the boutique mixed up the order. Yet every time I offered input, Lila's mother, Diane, would give me a tight smile and say, "We've got it handled, Margaret. Don't worry." And Ethan, caught up in the whirlwind of it all, would just nod and say, "Thanks, Mom. You're the best." But something felt off, like I was a guest in my own son's life. As we reached the reception area, I glanced at the seating chart pinned to a wooden easel. My name was there, but it wasn't with the family table at the front, where Ethan and Lila sat with Diane, her husband, and Lila's siblings. Instead, I was listed at a table near the back, tucked behind a pillar, next to Clara and a few distant cousins I hadn't seen in years. My heart sank, but I brushed it off. Maybe it was an oversight. Weddings were hectic after all. "Mom!" Ethan's voice pulled me from my thoughts. He strode toward me, his tuxedo crisp, his grin wide. He looked so much like his father in that moment. Tall, broad-shouldered, with eyes that crinkled at the corners. But unlike his father, Ethan had always been mine. My anchor through the years of scraped knees and late-night talks. "You look amazing," he said, pulling me into a hug. "Thanks, sweetheart," I said, my voice catching. "You clean up pretty well yourself." He laughed, but his eyes darted toward the crowd, already pulling away. "Lila's about to do the bouquet toss. You should get in there." I forced a smile. "Maybe I'll let the younger ones fight for it." He chuckled, then hesitated, like he wanted to say something more. But before he could, Lila's voice called out, bright and commanding, "Ethan, we need you for photos." "Duty calls," he said, squeezing my shoulder before jogging off. I watched him go, my chest tight. Clara nudged me. "He's a good boy, Margaret. Just distracted. You remember how weddings are." I nodded, but the unease grew heavier. I took my seat at the back table, the chatter around me a dull hum. The speeches began, and I waited for a mention, a nod to the mother of the groom who'd poured her heart into this day. But Diane's toast was all about Lila, her grace, her brilliance, how she'd brought light to their family. Ethan's speech was heartfelt, thanking Lila's parents, his friends, even the officiant. My name didn't come up, not once. I clapped along with everyone else, my hands mechanical. "It's fine," I told myself. "It's their day." But then I overheard something that made my blood run cold. Lila's sister, Chloe, was leaning toward a cousin, her voice low but sharp. "She always finds a way to make things about her, doesn't she?" I froze, my glass halfway to my lips. They were talking about me. I was sure of it. My mind raced, replaying every moment of the day, every interaction. Had I overstepped? Had I said something wrong? I'd only wanted to help, to be part of this milestone in Ethan's life. But the words stung, burrowing deep. Dinner passed in a blur. I pushed my food around my plate, forcing smiles when Clara or the cousins asked me questions. The band struck up a lively tune, and the dance floor filled. I watched Ethan and Lila sway together, their faces lit with joy. I wanted to feel that joy too, but all I could think about was Chloe's whisper. The empty space where my name should have been in the speeches. The table at the back. As the night wore on, I slipped outside for some air. The lawn was quiet. The music muffled. I wrapped my shawl tighter around my shoulders and stared at the stars, trying to shake the feeling that I was losing something I couldn't name. That's when I saw Diane and Lila near the marquee, their heads bent together. I couldn't hear their words, but Diane's hand was on Lila's arm, her expression serious. Lila nodded, then glanced toward the tent, toward where I'd been sitting. My stomach twisted. Were they talking about me, too? I turned away, my heart pounding. This was supposed to be a day of celebration, but it felt like I was being erased, piece by piece. I thought of the family portrait they'd taken earlier. The one I'd been told was just for the bride and groom's immediate family. I hadn't questioned it then, but now I wondered, would I be in any of the photos at all? The next morning, I drove home alone, the wedding's glow fading into a dull ache. Ethan and Lila were off on their honeymoon. and I told myself things would settle once they were back. But a week later, I got a call from Clara. Her voice was hesitant, almost apologetic. "Margaret, I didn't want to stir anything up, but I saw the wedding album proofs at Diane's house. You're not in any of them, not even the candid ones." I sat down hard on my kitchen chair, the phone trembling in my hand. "What do you mean, Clara?" "I mean they cropped you out, dear. Every single shot. I asked Diane about it, and she said it was a creative choice for the album. But I thought you should know. A creative choice." The words echoed in my mind, sharp and cold. I thanked Clara and hung up, my thoughts spiraling, not in the way I hated, but in a way that felt like falling. I pictured the photos, Ethan and Lila laughing, Diane beaming, the family gathered close, and me, nowhere to be seen. It wasn't just the photos. It was the seating, the speeches, the whispers. It was the bridal shower I hadn't been invited to. The one Ethan had brushed off as last minute, when I'd asked about it later. I flashed back to that moment, months before the wedding. I'd been at Ethan's apartment, helping him sort through old photos for a slideshow. Lila had been there, curled up on the couch with a glass of wine. I'd mentioned hearing about a bridal shower from a mutual friend, my tone light but curious. Lila's smile had faltered, just for a second before she said, "Oh, it was nothing big. Just a last-minute thing with a few friends. I didn't think you'd enjoy that kind of thing, Margaret." Ethan had chimed in, his voice casual. "Yeah, Mom, it was super low-key. You would have been bored." I'd laughed it off then, but the memory stung now. A last-minute thing, a creative choice. The pieces were starting to fit together, and the picture they formed wasn't one I wanted to see. I felt like I was standing on the edge of something vast and unknown, a truth I wasn't ready to face. But I couldn't ignore it anymore. I walked to my desk and pulled out an envelope I'd been keeping for Ethan, something I'd planned to give him after the honeymoon. It held a letter I'd written, pouring out everything I'd felt raising him. My pride, my fears, my love. I'd wanted it to be a moment between us, a reminder of the bond we'd always shared, but now, holding that envelope, I felt a shift inside me. Maybe it wasn't just a gift anymore. Maybe it was something else, a way to make him see what was happening, to make him understand. I set the envelope down and stared out the window, the weight of Clara's words settling deeper. They'd cropped me out of the photos, out of the day, out of Ethan's new life. But I wasn't invisible. Not yet. And as I stood there, a plan began to form, quiet and steady, like a heartbeat. I didn't know what I'd do with that envelope. Not exactly. But I knew one thing. I wasn't going to let myself be erased. The days that followed were a haze of restless energy. I kept replaying the wedding, picking apart every moment. Had I been too pushy with the planning? Had I misread Lila's smiles, Diane's clipped responses? I called Ethan, hoping to hear his voice, to feel that connection again. But he was still on his honeymoon, and his texts were short, distracted. "Having a blast, Mom. Talk soon." I stared at those words, my thumb hovering over the screen. I wanted to ask about the photos, about the shower, about why I'd been seated at the back. But I didn't. Not yet. Instead, I started noticing things I hadn't before. A group chat I'd been part of for wedding updates had gone silent, replaced by a new one I wasn't in. I only found out because Clara mentioned it in passing. Diane had hosted a post-wedding brunch for close family, and I hadn't been invited. Each discovery was a small cut, but together they bled me dry. I felt like I was losing Ethan, not to Lila, but to something bigger, something I couldn't quite name. One evening I sat at my kitchen table, the envelope in front of me. I'd added to the letter since the wedding. scribbling thoughts in the margins. Questions, hurts, things I couldn't say out loud. I didn't know if I'd give it to Ethan or burn it. All I knew was that it held everything I was afraid to lose. I traced my finger over his name, written in my careful script. Ethan, I whispered, as if saying it could bring him back to me. The doorbell rang, startling me. It was Clara, her face etched with concern. I didn't want to call, she said, stepping inside. I found something else, Margaret. It's not good. She handed me a folded piece of paper, her hands trembling. I opened it, my eyes scanning the words. It was a printed email, forwarded from Diane to Clara, by mistake. The subject line read, Family Portrait Final Edits. The message was brief, but it hit like a punch. Please ensure Margaret is removed from all group shots. We want the focus on the core family. Core family. The words burned. I looked at Clara, my voice barely a whisper. What does this mean? She shook her head, her eyes soft with pity. I don't know, dear, but I think you need to talk to Ethan. Soon. I nodded, but my mind was already racing. The envelope on the table felt heavier now, like it carried more than just words. It carried a choice. I could stay quiet, let myself fade into the background of Ethan's new life. Or I could fight, not with anger, but with truth. I didn't know what that would look like, but as I tucked the email into the envelope alongside my letter, I felt something shift inside me. A spark, small but fierce. I stood in my kitchen, the envelope still on the table, its edges worn from my restless fingers. Clara's visit had left me shaken, the printed email from Diane burning a hole in my thoughts. Core family. The words looped in my mind, each repetition sharpening the ache in my chest. I wanted to call Ethan, to demand answers, but he was still on his honeymoon, and the thought of confronting him over a shaky phone line felt wrong. This wasn't a conversation for texts or voicemails. It needed to be face to face, where I could see his eyes, hear his voice, know if he was still my son, or if I'd lost him to this new world he'd married into. I spent the next few days in a fog, replaying every moment of the wedding, every smile that didn't reach Lila's eyes, every clipped word from Diane. I tried to distract myself, watering the plants, flipping through old photo albums, anything to keep my hands busy. But the albums only made it worse. There was Ethan at 5, gap-toothed and grinning, clinging to my hand at the park. Ethan at 16, rolling his eyes as I fussed over his prom tie. Ethan at 25, hugging me tight after his college graduation, whispering, I couldn't have done it without you, Mom. Where was that Ethan now? Had he known about the portrait edits, the brunch I wasn't invited to, the whispers at the wedding? Or was he just caught up in Lila's orbit, blind to the way her family was pushing me out? The day Ethan and Lila returned from their honeymoon, I drove to their house, the envelope tucked in my purse. My hands gripped the steering wheel, my knuckles white. I told myself I wasn't going to confront them, not yet. I just wanted to see my son, to feel that connection again, to believe we could still be us. But as I pulled into their driveway, the sight of their sleek, modern home, Lila's home really, bought with her parents' money, made my stomach twist. It was all glass and sharp angles, nothing like the cozy, cluttered house where Ethan and I had built our life. I felt like an intruder before I even knocked. Lila answered the door, her hair swept into a loose bun, her smile bright but fleeting. Margaret, you're here, she said, stepping aside to let me in. Her voice was warm, but there was a tightness to it, like she was reading from a script. Thought I'd drop by to see you both, I said, forcing a smile. How was the honeymoon? Amazing, she said, leading me into the living room. Bali was like a dream. The beaches, the food. Oh, you have to see the photos. I nodded, glancing around for Ethan. The room was pristine, all white furniture and abstract art. The kind of place that felt more like a showroom than a home. Is Ethan around? He's in the shower, Lila said, waving a hand. He'll be out soon. Can I get you some coffee? I shook my head, my eyes catching on a large framed photo on the wall above the fireplace. It was new, its gold frame gleaming under the recessed lights. My heart stuttered. It was a family portrait from the wedding. The one I'd been told was just for the bride and groom's immediate family. I stepped closer, my purse heavy against my shoulder, the envelope inside it like a lead weight. The photo was stunning, I'd give them that. Ethan and Lila stood at the center, their faces glowing with joy. Diane and her husband flanked them, their smiles proud and polished. Lila's siblings were there too, all of them perfectly posed, the backdrop of the venue's ivy-covered arch framing them like a painting. But as my eyes scanned the image, a cold dread settled in my bones. I wasn't there. Not a trace of me, not my blue dress, not my face, not even a glimpse of my shoulder in the crowd. They'd cropped me out, just like Clara had warned. "Oh, you noticed the portrait?" Lila's voice chirped behind me, startling me. She stepped closer, her hands clasped together. "Isn't it gorgeous? The photographer did such an incredible job." I turned to her, my throat tight. "It's beautiful," I managed, my voice steady despite the storm inside me. "But I'm not in it." Lila's smile didn't waver, but her eyes flickered just for a moment. "Oh, yeah, the photographer said it was the best angle for the frame. You know how these things are? Sometimes they have to make tough calls to get the composition right." Her words were smooth, practiced, but they cut deeper than any knife. A tough call, a creative choice. I wanted to ask why no one had told me, why I hadn't been invited to stand with them in the first place, why every step of this wedding felt like a deliberate push to the sidelines. But I didn't. Not yet. I swallowed the hurt, letting it burn in my chest, and nodded. "Makes sense," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Lila tilted her head, her expression softening, but there was something in her eyes. Pity, maybe, or something sharper. "You okay, Margaret? You seem a little off." "I'm fine," I lied, forcing another smile. "Just tired. It's been a long week." She nodded, but I could feel her watching me, like she was waiting for me to crack. The air between us was thick, charged with things neither of us was saying. I glanced back at the portrait, my absence screaming louder than any words. I thought of the envelope in my purse, the letter I'd poured my heart into, the email from Diane I'd tucked inside. Part of me wanted to pull it out right then, to lay it all bare and demand answers. But I couldn't. Not with Lila standing there, her smile like a mask, and Ethan still out of reach. "Hey, Mom." Ethan's voice broke the tension, and I turned to see him striding into the room, his hair damp, his grin wide. He pulled me into a hug, and for a moment, I felt like I could breathe again. He smelled like cedar and soap, the same scent he'd used since high school. "Missed you," he said, pulling back to look at me. "You good?" "Yeah," I said, my voice catching. "Just happy to see you." He glanced at the portrait, then back at me, his brow furrowing slightly. "You saw the photo, huh? Pretty cool, right?" I nodded, my heart pounding. Did he know? Had he seen the original? The one where I'd been standing just outside the frame, smiling like I belonged? Or had he only seen this version, the one that erased me? I wanted to ask, but the words stuck in my throat. Instead, I said, "It's really something." Lila slipped her arm through Ethan's, her smile bright again. We're so happy with it. It's like the perfect memory of the day. Ethan nodded, but his eyes lingered on me, like he sensed something was wrong. You sure you're okay, Mom? You're kinda quiet. I forced a laugh, hating how brittle it sounded. Just taking it all in, sweetheart. You two have a lot to be proud of. He seemed to relax, but I could feel Lila's gaze steady and unyielding. The room felt smaller, the walls closing in. I needed air, space, a moment to think. I should get going, I said, stepping towards the door. I've got some errands to run. Already? Ethan said, his brow creasing again. You just got here. I'll come back soon, I promised. My hand on my purse, the envelope's weight anchoring me. We'll catch up properly. Lila walked me to the door, her voice light. Thanks for stopping by, Margaret. It's always great to see you. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. As I stepped outside, the door clicking shut behind me, I felt the tears prick my eyes. I climbed into my car and sat there, staring at the house, the portrait burned into my mind. They hadn't just cropped me out of a photo. They were cropping me out of Ethan's life, piece by piece, and I didn't know why. I drove home, the envelope still in my purse, its contents heavier than ever. The letter I'd written for Ethan was meant to be a gift, a way to share my heart with him. But now, with Diane's email tucked inside, it felt like something else, a weapon, a shield, a line in the sand. I didn't know what I'd do with it, not yet. But as I pulled into my driveway, one thing was clear. I wasn't going to let this go, not without a fight. That night, I sat at my kitchen table, the envelope in front of me. I pulled out the letter, my eyes scanning the words I'd written months ago, before the wedding, before the whispers and the cropped photos. Ethan, you've always been my greatest joy, I'd written. No matter where life takes you, I'll always be here, loving you, cheering you on. I'd meant every word, but now they felt like a plea, a cry to be seen. I unfolded Diane's email next, rereading the cold, clinical instruction. Please ensure Margaret is removed from all group shots. We want the focus on the core family. Core family. The phrase was a blade, slicing through years of memories. Ethan's first steps, his late-night calls from college, the way he'd always turned to me when he needed advice. Was I not part of that core? Had I ever been in their eyes? I thought of Lila's excuse about the photographer, the way her smile never wavered. I thought of Ethan's furrowed brow, the flicker of concern in his eyes. Did he know? Was he complicit? Or was he just as blindsided as I was? The questions gnawed at me, each one opening a new wound. I wanted to believe he was still my Ethan, the boy who'd clung to me through storms and heartbreaks. But doubt was a powerful thing, and it was growing, spreading like ink in water. The next morning, I called Clara. Her voice was soft, cautious. Did you talk to Ethan? She asked. Not yet, I said, my fingers tracing the envelope's edge. But I saw the portrait. It's just like you said. She sighed, the sound heavy with years of wisdom and worry. Margaret, you need to be careful. Families like Lila's, they close ranks. I've seen it before. You don't want to push Ethan away. I'm not pushing, I said, my voice sharper than I meant. I'm just trying to understand why they're doing this. I know, she said. But sometimes the truth comes at a cost. Just think about what you want, dear. What you're willing to lose. Her words stayed with me, echoing as I went through the motions of the day. I didn't want to lose Ethan, but I was already losing him, wasn't I? Every unreturned call, every exclusion, every cropped photo was a step further from the life we'd built. And I couldn't just stand by, pretending it wasn't happening. That afternoon, I made a decision. I wouldn't confront Ethan yet, Not with the email, not with the full weight of my hurt. But I needed to see him again, to look into his eyes and know if he was still mine. I texted him, keeping it light. Miss you, sweetheart. Can I come by tomorrow? Maybe bring dinner? His reply came hours later, short but warm. Sounds great, Mom. See you then. I exhaled, a flicker of hope stirring. Maybe I was wrong. Maybe this was all a misunderstanding. A series of oversights I'd blown out of proportion. But as I tucked the envelope into my purse, I couldn't shake the feeling that tomorrow would change everything. Whether I gave him the letter or not, whether I mentioned the portrait or kept silent, something was coming. And I wasn't sure I was ready for it. The next morning, I woke with a heaviness I couldn't shake. The envelope still in my purse, its presence like a pulse in the quiet of my home. Ethan's text from the night before. Sounds great, Mom. See you then? Had sparked a flicker of hope, but it was fragile, easily smothered by the memory of that framed portrait. My absence carved out with surgical precision. I wanted to believe I'd walk into his house tonight, share a meal, and find the Ethan I'd raised, the one who'd always seen me, no matter what. But doubt clung to me, fed by Diane's email, Lila's smooth excuses, and the growing list of moments where I'd been pushed aside. I needed to talk to someone, to untangle the knot in my chest before I faced him. I called Linda, my friend of 20 years, the one person who'd seen me through Ethan's father leaving, through the long nights of single motherhood. She answered on the first ring, her voice warm but sharp, like she could already sense something was wrong. Margaret, you sound like you're carrying the world. What's going on? I hesitated, the words catching in my throat. Can you come over? I need to talk. Half an hour later, she was at my kitchen table, her greying curls pulled back, her eyes steady as she sipped the tea I'd made. I told her everything. The wedding, the back table, the missing speeches, the bridal shower I'd never been invited to. I told her about the portrait, Lila's casual lie about the photographer, and the email Clara had found, its cold words still etched in my mind. Linda listened, her face tightening with every detail, her fingers drumming softly on the mug. When I finished, she leaned back, her gaze piercing. Margaret, this isn't just oversight. This is deliberate. They're cutting you out. And Ethan's either too blind to see it or too weak to stop it. Her words stung, but they weren't wrong. I stared at the envelope on the counter, its edges frayed from my constant handling. I don't know what to do, Linda. I keep thinking if I say something, I'll push him away. But if I don't, silence is permission, she said, her voice firm but not unkind. You're letting them erase you piece by piece. You need to say something, Margaret. Not just for you, for Ethan. He needs to know what's happening, even if it hurts. I nodded, my throat tight. I want to give him this, I said, gesturing to the envelope. It's a letter I wrote before all this. About us, about everything I felt raising him. But now, I've added things. The email from Diane, and something else. Linda raised an eyebrow, leaning forward. Something else? I didn't answer, not directly. The truth was, I wasn't sure what else I'd put in there. Not yet. My mind had been turning over possibilities, each one heavier than the last. A photo from Ethan's childhood, maybe, to remind him of who we were. A note about the whispers I'd overheard, the exclusions I'd pieced together. Or something more, something that would shake them all, force them to see me. I didn't know, but the weight of it felt right, like a reckoning waiting to be born. Whatever's in there, Linda said, her voice softening. Make sure it's you, not anger, not spite, just you, Margaret. That's what he needs to see. I spent the rest of the day preparing, my hands moving on instinct. I reread the letter, its pages filled with my love for Ethan, my pride, my fears. I tucked Diane's email inside, its words a stark contrast to mine. And then, in a moment of clarity, I added one more thing. Not a photo or a note, but something that felt like a key, a piece of the truth I hadn't fully faced myself. I sealed the envelope, my heart pounding, and slipped it back into my purse. Tonight, I'd see Ethan. I'd bring dinner, smile, act like everything was fine. But the envelope would be with me, a silent promise that I wasn't invisible. The drive to Ethan's house that evening felt longer than it should have. The envelope in my purse like a heartbeat I couldn't ignore. I'd made lasagna, Ethan's favorite, the dish I'd cooked for every birthday until he left for college. The smell filled the car, grounding me, reminding me of the years we'd spent laughing over messy plates, just the two of us. I wanted that back, even for a moment. But as I pulled into their driveway, the sleek glass house looming against the dusk, I felt that familiar twist in my stomach. This wasn't my place anymore. Ethan opened the door, his grin wide, and for a second I could breathe. "Mum, you didn't have to go all out," he said, taking the lasagna dish from my hands. "Smells amazing." "Had to spoil you a little," I said, stepping inside. Lila was in the kitchen, setting out plates, her smile polite but distant. "Margaret, this is so sweet of you," she said, her voice light. "We've been living off takeout since we got back." We sat at their dining table, the lasagna steaming between us. And for a while, it felt almost normal. Ethan told stories about Bali, the markets, the sunsets, a boat trip that nearly capsized. I laughed, asked questions, let myself sink into the warmth of his voice. But Lila was quieter, her eyes flicking to me now and then, like she was measuring something. And the portrait on the wall, its gold frame catching the light, was a constant reminder of what I wasn't saying. After dinner, as we cleared the plates, I caught Ethan alone in the kitchen. My purse was on the counter, the envelope inside it calling to me. I wanted to give it to him, to say something, but the words wouldn't come. Not yet. Instead, I hugged him, holding on a little longer than usual. "I'm proud of you," I whispered, my voice catching. He pulled back, his brow furrowing. "You okay, Mom? You've been, I don't know, different." "I'm fine," I said, forcing a smile. "Just miss you, that's all." He nodded, but his eyes lingered on me, like he wasn't convinced. I almost reached for the envelope then, almost let it all spill out. But Lila's voice called from the living room, breaking the moment. And I let it go. For now. Weeks passed, and the envelope stayed in my purse, a weight I carried everywhere. Ethan and I texted, but our conversations were short, surface level. The holidays were approaching, and with them, Easter dinner at Ethan and Lila's house. Diane had insisted on hosting it there, a family tradition she called it, though I'd never been part of one with them. I was invited, but the invitation came late, almost an afterthought, and I couldn't shake the feeling it was out of obligation, not warmth. The morning of Easter, I stood in my bedroom, staring at the envelope on my dresser. I'd added nothing more to it, but its contents felt heavier with every passing day. Linda's words echoed in my mind. Silence is permission. I couldn't keep pretending everything was fine, not when every interaction with Lila's family felt like another cut. Tonight, I'd give Ethan the envelope. Not to hurt him, but to make him see, to make him choose. I arrived at their house with a homemade pie, my hand steady despite the storm inside me. The dining room was packed. Diane and her husband, Lila's siblings, a few aunts and uncles, all of them laughing, their voices blending into a polished hum. Ethan greeted me with a hug, But Lila's smile was tight, her eyes darting to Diane as I set the pie on the table. The portrait hung on the wall, its absence of me louder than ever. Dinner was a blur of clinking glasses and forced small talk. I sat between Clara and one of Lila's cousins, my words careful, my smiles practiced. But the tension was thick, a current running beneath the surface. Diane's laughter was too sharp, Lila's glances too frequent. Ethan seemed distracted, his eyes flicking to me now and then, like he could sense the shift in the air. As dessert was served, I made my move. I leaned toward Ethan, my voice low, and slipped the envelope from my purse. "This is for you," I said, pressing it into his hands. "Don't open it here." He frowned, turning the envelope over, his fingers tracing his name in my handwriting. "What is it, Mom? Just something I needed to give you?" I said, my heart pounding. "Please, wait until later." But Lila was watching, her fork frozen halfway to her mouth. "What's that?" she asked, her voice light, but edged with something harder. "It's personal," I said, my tone firm. "For Ethan." The table went quiet, all eyes on us. Diane's smile faltered, her gaze sharp. Ethan looked between me and Lila, his expression torn. "Can't I just open it now?" he asked, his voice soft, almost pleading. I wanted to say no, to keep this moment private, but the weight of their stares was suffocating. "If you want," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. He hesitated, then tore open the envelope. The letter fell out first, its pages unfolding, followed by Diane's email. And then the final piece, the thing I'd added that day with Linda, the thing I hadn't even told her about. Ethan's eyes scanned the letter, his face paling. Lila leaned over, her breath catching as she read. Her hand flew to her mouth, tears springing to her eyes. The room was silent, the air heavy with shock. "Ethan," Lila whispered, her voice breaking. What is this?" He didn't answer, his gaze locked on the contents, his hands trembling. I sat frozen, my heart in my throat, watching the truth unravel, not the way I'd planned, but in a way that couldn't be undone. The dining room was a frozen tableau, the air thick with the weight of what Ethan held in his trembling hands. Lila's tears streaked her face, her hand still pressed to her mouth, stifling a sob. Ethan's eyes were locked on the contents of the envelope, his face drained of color, as if the world he'd known had cracked open. Diane's fork clattered against her plate, her polished composure shattered, while the rest of the table sat in stunned silence, their eyes darting between us. I felt their stares like needles, but I couldn't move, couldn't speak. The envelope, my letter, Diane's email, and that final unnamed piece I'd added, had torn through the facade of this perfect Easter dinner, and there was no going back. Ethan looked up at me, his voice barely a whisper. "Mom, why?" The word carried years of history, of love and trust I thought we'd never lose. But it also carried hurt, confusion, a question I wasn't ready to answer, not here, not with Lila's family watching, waiting for me to crumble. I opened my mouth, but no words came. My heart pounded, and in that moment, my mind slipped backward, pulling me away from the table, away from the envelope, into the past where Ethan and I had built our life. I needed to remember who we were, to hold on to the truth of what I'd given him, before I faced what I'd just done. I was 26 when Ethan was born, a single mother in a cramped apartment with peeling wallpaper and a leaky faucet I never got around to fixing. His father had walked out before Ethan's first cry, leaving me with a stack of bills and a heart I thought would never heal. But when I held Ethan, his tiny fingers curling around mine, I knew I'd do anything to give him a life better than the one I'd had. Those early years were a blur of double shifts at the hospital, my nurse's scrubs stained with coffee and worry. I'd come home at dawn, my feet aching, to find Ethan asleep in his crib. His soft breaths, the only thing keeping me going. I remembered the night he spiked a fever at 3, his small body burning against mine as I rushed him to the ER. The waiting room was chaos. Crying babies, harried doctors. But I held him close, whispering stories about pirates and dragons to keep him calm. When the doctor finally saw us, I begged for answers, my voice cracking as I fought tears. "He's all I have," I told her. And I meant it. Ethan was my world, my reason, my fight. As he grew, I poured everything into him. I stayed up late helping with math homework, even when numbers made my head spin. I drove him to soccer practices, cheering from the sidelines in the rain, my umbrella forgotten in the car. When he was 15, he got into a fight at school, his lip bloody, his eyes defiant. I didn't yell. I sat him down, listened, and told him he was better than his anger. "You're my heart, Ethan," I said. "Don't let anyone make you forget that." He'd hug me then, his teenage pride giving way to the boy who still needed his mum. College was the hardest. Ethan got into a good school, but the tuition was a mountain I couldn't climb on my salary. I took out loans, worked extra shifts, and when that wasn't enough, I sold the necklace my mother had left me. The one thing I'd sworn I'd keep. Ethan never knew. I didn't want him to carry that weight. When he graduated, debt-free because I'd paid off his loans in secret, he threw his arms around me, his cap askew. "You're the best, Mum," he said, and I believed we'd always be us, no matter what. But now, sitting at this Easter table, those memories felt like relics from another life. The boy who'd clung to me was gone, replaced by a man who let his new family crop me out of his wedding. His home, his heart. The pain of it was a living thing, clawing at my chest, and it deepened with every memory of what I'd given him. My time, my love, my everything. I snapped back to the present, Ethan's question still hanging in the air. "Mom, why?" Lila was sobbing now, her face buried in her hands, and Diane's eyes were cold, calculating, as if she could will this moment away. I wanted to answer, to explain, but the words were too big, too raw. Instead, I watched as Ethan set the envelope's contents on the table, each piece a wound laid bare. The first was my letter, its pages worn from my endless revisions. I'd written it before the wedding, pouring out my love for him, my pride, my hopes for his future. But I'd added more since. Lines about the hurt, the exclusions, the way I'd felt erased. It was raw, unfiltered, a mother's heart spilled onto paper. Ethan's eyes lingered on it, his breath uneven, but it was the next piece that broke the silence. Diane's email, the one Clara had found, sat stark and clinical beside the letter. "Please ensure Margaret is removed from all group shots. We want the focus on the core family." The words were a slap, and I saw Ethan flinch as he read them, his jaw tightening. Lila's sobs grew louder, her shoulders shaking, and I wondered if she'd known, if she'd been part of it, or if she was as blindsided as Ethan seemed to be. But it was the final piece that changed everything. Ethan lifted it from the table, his hands shaking, and I saw it clearly. A legal document, its text, formal and unyielding. It was my will, rewritten in the weeks after the wedding, after the portrait, after the brunch I wasn't invited to. In it, I disinherited Ethan, leaving everything, my savings, my house, the life I'd built, to a charity in my late husband's name. Not because I hated Ethan, but because I needed him to understand what it felt like to lose something irreplaceable. I'd wanted him to see me, to fight for me, the way I'd always fought for him. And there, tucked beneath the will, was a photograph, the original wedding portrait. The one where I stood at the edge, my blue dress catching the light, my smile tentative but real. I'd kept a copy for myself, a secret I hadn't shared, a reminder that I'd been there, even if they'd tried to erase me. I'd had a second version made, just for me, framed and hidden in my bedroom, where I could look at it and remember the day I'd tried to belong. Ethan stared at the photo, then the will, his face a mask of shock. "Mom," he said, his voice breaking, You cut me out." I swallowed, my throat burning. I didn't want to, Ethan, but I needed you to know what it feels like. To be left out, to be invisible. Lila's head snapped up, her eyes red and wild. "How could you do this?" she cried, her voice raw. "He's your son." "And I was his mother," I said, my voice steady, despite the tears threatening to spill. "But you all made sure I wasn't part of this family. The portrait, the wedding, the brunch. Every choice you made told me I didn't belong." Diane stood, her chair scraping against the floor. "This is outrageous, Margaret. You're twisting everything, making it about you." "Am I?" I asked, meeting her gaze. "Or did you decide I wasn't worth keeping?" The room erupted, voices overlapping. Clara's soft pleas for calm, Lila's cousins murmuring, Ethan's aunt trying to mediate. But Ethan stayed silent, his eyes fixed on the will, the photo, the letter. I watched him, my heart breaking, knowing I'd crossed a line I couldn't uncross. I'd wanted him to see me, but at what cost? He stood, the papers clutched in his hand, and walked out of the room without a word. Lila followed, her sobs echoing down the hall. The table was chaos, but I felt strangely calm, like I'd finally spoken the truth, even if it had shattered everything. I didn't know what would happen next, whether Ethan would forgive me, whether he'd understand, or whether I'd lost him for good. But as I sat there, the portrait glaring down at me, I knew one thing. I wasn't invisible anymore. And whatever came next, I'd face it with the same strength I'd carried all those years, raising a boy who'd once been my everything. The dining room was a wreckage of half-eaten pie and scattered napkins, the echoes of raised voices still lingering as Ethan and Lila disappeared down the hall. I sat motionless, the weight of what I'd done settling like a stone in my chest. The envelope's contents, my letter, Diane's email, the will, and that original wedding portrait with me still in it, lay strewn across the table, a testament to the truth I'd forced into the open. Diane's glare burned into me, her lips pressed into a thin line. But I didn't flinch. Clara reached for my hand under the table, her grip warm and steady. But it couldn't ease the ache. Ethan's silence as he walked away, the papers clutched in his hand, was louder than any argument. I'd wanted him to see me, to understand the pain of being erased. But now I wondered if I'd pushed him too far, if I'd broken something we could never mend. I drove home in a daze, the night pressing against my car windows, the envelope back in my purse, empty now but heavier than ever. My house was quiet, the kind of quiet that amplifies every thought, every regret. I sank onto the couch, staring at the framed photo on my mantel. Ethan at 10, grinning on a camping trip, his fishing rod held high. That boy felt so far away now, replaced by a man who might never look at me the same. I closed my eyes, Linda's words echoing. "Make sure it's you, Margaret. Not anger, not spite." Had I done that? Or had I let the hurt win? The phone rang, shattering the silence. My heart leapt, hoping it was Ethan, but the screen showed Sophie's name. My daughter, Ethan's younger sister, who'd been away at college and missed the Easter dinner. Her voice was soft, hesitant when I answered. "Mum? Are you okay?" I just got off the phone with Ethan. He told me what happened. I swallowed, my throat tight. I'm here, Soph, just trying to make sense of it all. There was a pause, and then her voice dropped, barely above a whisper. Mom, I need to tell you something. About the wedding. About Lila. Sophie's words hit like a gust of cold wind, pulling me back to that night, to the moment I'd been waiting for some kind of truth to surface. I gripped the phone, my knuckles white as she continued, her voice trembling with the weight of what she was about to confess. It was Lila's idea, she said, the words rushing out like she'd been holding them too long. The portrait, the seating, all of it. She said you were too controlling, that you were trying to take over the wedding, make it about you. She told Ethan and Diane that keeping you at a distance would be better for everyone. I froze. The air sucked from the room. Controlling. The word was a blade, slicing through years of sacrifice, of love poured into Ethan's life. I saw myself tying ribbons around wedding favors, driving hours for Lila's veil, staying up late to perfect the seating chart, always with a smile, always with the hope of being part of their day. And this was how she'd seen me. A threat to be managed, a figure to be cropped out. Sophie, I said, my voice shaking. Why didn't you tell me? I didn't know the full extent until tonight, she said, her voice breaking. Ethan called me, Mom. He's a mess. He said he didn't know about the portrait edits, not until he saw that email you gave him. He thought Lila was just stressed, that it was wedding chaos. But now he's questioning everything. I closed my eyes, picturing Ethan's pale face at the table, the way he'd clutched the will and the photo. What did he say, Soph? About me. He's hurt, she said softly. He doesn't understand why you'd disinherit him, why you'd go that far. But he's also angry, at Lila, at Diane. He said he needs time to think. Time. The word felt like a lifeline, and a sentence all at once. I wanted to drive to his house, to hold him like I had when he was small, to tell him I'd only wanted to be seen. But Sophie's confession was still sinking in, each word a new wound. Lila had orchestrated it all, the back table, the missing speeches, the cropped portrait, because she thought I was controlling. And Ethan, my Ethan, had let it happen, whether he knew it or not. I gave everything, Sophie, I said, my voice cracking. Every late night, every sacrifice, every moment I put him first. All I ever wanted was to be respected, to be part of his life, not pushed out like I was nothing. I know, Mom, she said, tears in her voice. I know, and Ethan knows, deep down. He's just caught in the middle right now. But he loves you. He always will. Her words were a comfort, but they didn't erase the pain. I thought of the original portrait, the one I'd kept for myself, framed in my bedroom where I could see it every day. In it, I stood at the edge, my smile tentative but real, believing I was part of something. Now, knowing Lila's role, that smile felt like a betrayal of myself, of the mother I'd been. Did Lila say anything else? I asked, my voice steadier now. About why she thought I was controlling. Sophie hesitated, then sighed. She told Ethan you were too involved, that you kept trying to fix things during the planning, like the seating chart. You suggested moving some of her cousins, and she took it as you trying to control the guest list. And when you picked up her veil, she said it felt like you were inserting yourself into her moment. I laughed, a bitter sound that surprised even me. Inserting myself? Sophie, I was trying to help. I wanted her to feel supported, to know I cared. I know, Sophie said. But Lila, she's different, Mom. She grew up with Diane, with that whole polished, perfect world. They don't trust people who aren't like them. And you're real. You're messy. In the best way. That scares her. The truth of it settled over me, heavy, but clarifying. Lila hadn't just pushed me out. She'd built a narrative where I was the problem. A story she could sell to Ethan, to Diane, to herself. And I'd played into it, hadn't I? By staying silent, by smiling through the slights, by hoping love would be enough. What do I do now, Soph? I asked, my voice small. I gave him that will, that letter. I changed everything. You wait, she said, her voice firm. You gave him the truth, Mom. Now he has to decide what to do with it. But don't give up on him. He's still your son. We talked a little longer, her voice a lifeline in the dark. But when I hung up, the house felt emptier than before. I walked to my bedroom and stood in front of the framed portrait, my fingers tracing the glass over my face. I'd had that second version made for myself, a quiet act of defiance, a way to hold on to the moment they'd tried to erase. But now, knowing Lila's confession, it felt like more. A reminder that I'd been there, that I'd mattered, even if they couldn't see it. I thought of the will, the charity in my late husband's name, the choice I'd made in a moment of pain and clarity. It wasn't about money. My savings weren't much, and the house was modest. It was about making Ethan feel what I'd felt, the sting of being cut out. But Sophie's words gnawed at me. He's a mess. Had I gone too far? Had I lost him for good?